Hello, my name is Owen, and welcome to a quick review of Under Heaven by Guy Gavriel Kay. This was our book of the month for the month of May, and we already finished it. Who's better than me? Who is? Not many people. I listened to this on an audiobook, which isn't something that I always do, and it was recommended by a friend of the channel, Nihad-M. What the M stands for, mystery to us all. But as we know, these Book of the Month series, they are recommending the books that you would stake your reputation on. So if I don't like a book, I take it as a personal offense to me, and I bash your character publicly for everyone to see online. However, Nihad, you are a certified reader, my friend. I really enjoyed this book, and we're going to go over some of the minutiae, some of the details, how it ranks up with other Guy Gavriel Kay books that I've read. This is the third one that I've read, the other ones being Taigana and The Lines of Al Rasan. But let's just do the overview first. This is an Asian-inspired historical fantasy. Historical fantasy is not something I always dive into. It's a little bit more grounded, normally grounded in tone, and then grounded in... guess what? History. It's grounded in history. So a lot of the wide-scale events that this book explores and talks about were based on real Chinese history, which is something fascinating. And it always, because every once in a while I like to read pure history books as well. It kind of just scratches that itch, two itches at the same time of fantasy, and have a little bit of a spark of magic in there, while also giving you some history and makes you want to really dive deep into specific culture's history, specific time period in history. Because I'm not gonna lie, I did go into a Wikipedia rabbit hole, and you're gonna say, Wikipedia, what a great source, idiot. No, listen. Wikipedia is a great source if you've got a little time, okay? Not everyone could just hit the library and start reading tomes, okay? So I went on the Wikipedia rabbit hole. I know no one was probably going to complain about it, but I just want to get ahead of the curve. Me, always thinking 3 steps ahead. But going into things that I really liked about this book, one thing that Guy Gavriel Kay is fantastic about is, well, first of all, his writing. His prose is very poetic. And this is a story, one thing I noticed across all of his books, it feels... His writing style has a very distinct flavor, and it's a kind of flavor, and I don't know why I'm saying flavor. That's not really the best way to describe it, but great authors have a way of writing that's almost beyond criticism, and not in the sense that you could say oh, his writing's too flowery, he doesn't get to the point quick enough, whatever. People say that about Tolkien as well, right? But the difference between writing of great writers and writing of regular writers is you can tell the regular writers are writing. So the criticism could be oh, I don't really like the way that your prose is. Guy Gavriel Kay for me is one of the writers that I want to analyze. You know what I mean? And Steven Erikson's the same way for me, and a lot of classic Steinbeck authors. You don't I can't. I mean, I guess you can because you're an idiot, but I can't criticize John Steinbeck's formation of the words. You're just analyzing, looking for the double meaning because it's there. It's great writing. Guy Gavriel Kay is the exact same way, where I feel when I'm reading or listening to his words, I'm listening to someone with a very tight control of their craft, and I'm just desperately trying to immerse myself in what they're trying to tell me in the story. Not to say that I think that this book in particular is perfect. I think there are some flaws with it, but I do think that Guy Gavriel Kay is a great author, and if it's not a great book, it's just the choice of story, if that makes sense. Does that make any sense? I'm just trying to say I really like Guy Gavriel Kay's writing style, I guess, in summary. I hold him to a high standard, or his standard is high when I examine it, right? But one thing I love about this story is we're introduced very quickly to the main character's character, in terms of how good they are as a person. I really like this introduction of a man who's basically just burying bodies all day just because he wants to put their souls to rest. It's a very honorable thing, and it sets the tone for his character. He is an honorable person. And in this book in particular, Kay is not afraid to be black and white with his main character. His character is a good guy. His character is a hero. His character does the right thing. There are times where he's uncertain, and there are times where they hint at flaws, oh, well, Ty, he has anger issues. Does he have anger issues? I don't really know if we see that. In most cases, he seems very clear-headed. He seems like he's doing the right thing. He seems like a good guy, which is refreshing, especially for a lot of fantasy books. They try to be grimdark. They try to have complex characters that are kind of anti-hero-ish. Ty is not one of those, and I think for what the tone of this book and what is trying to be told with the story, it's very, very refreshing to have. What happens to our main character when he's gifted these 250 horses is kind of like the inciting incident of this event. But really our main character in this inciting incident doesn't have a lot to do with the broad strokes events of it. What is really important is less so the events that happen, but how it affects our characters. Because Ty is put in this position where people are out to get him. He doesn't know why this is happening to him. He doesn't know who's out to get him. And basically this act of kindness, this reward he got for being so honorable, basically blows his entire life up. And there's this whole plot with him trying to deal with the aftermath of a gift, essentially. It was such a grand gift that he can't even give it away, and how that changed his life. But also like his love and his pining after his love, and the people that are after him, like their ego and their like decisions and how it affects the politics. And it does dive into the politics of this world a little bit, but Ty is kind of separate from all that. And I think I could see some people seeing that as a flaw because a lot of his actions don't play a direct role on the story. I could see if some people thought that like, okay, the story starts, he's getting these horses and everybody wants a piece of them and everyone starts trying to assassinate him, right? Okay, well surely this book is going to end with something with a grand gesture with the horses. Things are going to be saved. It's going to be up to Ty to save the day, pick a side. And it's not really the case. The politics would have you get the feeling that the plot events of this book would have happened without Ty, but they were just sped up by what happened in the book. And I think that's interesting. The politics are fleshed out. You get a good sense of these characters and why, in this case, a civil war would happen. Why infighting and why like an empire falls or an emperor falls in this case. And I think that was explored very, very well. But kind of going back to his poetic writing style, we don't really get down to the nitty-gritty of it. We kind of like float over it like a poem. We get good insights into characters and their thinking and their thought process, but it all kind of feels a little bit ethereal. And a lot of books that I come to enjoy are kind of like that. I found it's not always like Dune is kind of like that as well, in the sense that we're kind of like floating over the story. This is a little bit like that as well, and I found that's a common tone for a lot of Guy Gavriel Kay's books, particularly like Lines of Alverson. We're following in that book, we're following these great men, these great leaders, and we get to know their insides, their thoughts, their anxieties, but we're kind of floating over the story like it's a story being told to us. It's like a legend being told to us. This is a very similar way on exploring that ideas. And the other thing I think Guy Gavriel Kay does great is tragedy. Now, this isn't by far, it is not his saddest book, but it is beautiful, and it is beautiful in how Kay understands how bittersweet life can be, and that sounds pretty deep, and it's because he's a deep guy, and it's a deep book, but it's particularly how he explores like love, and there's this character where in a happy ending story they would get together, but things don't always play out the way you want them to, and it's tragic but in a sweet way, and I think it resolves itself in a way that you're optimistic about humanity. You're not down in the doldrums of nothing ever works out, life is meaningless. It feels very realistic, and I think for a historical fantasy book, Kay has the perfect mix of realism, groundedness, with the twisting of optimism and magic and a little bit of love in the world, right? And I think it's overall just a very, very beautiful book. How I think it could be improved, I guess, why it's probably my least favorite of Guy Gavriel Kay's books. I think the plot itself, I couldn't quite bite my teeth into it that much, probably because Ty doesn't have a direct influence like I was mentioning. There are some action scenes. It's not very action heavy at all, and overall it just feels like I'm glad I heard this story, but I wasn't super invested. At the end of the day, like who won the rebellion, who won the war, who became the new emperor, it doesn't really matter to the story, and it doesn't really matter to me. So I think in that sense, a perfect version of this would have been a story where I was invested in historical outcome as well as our character outcomes, where instead I was just invested in our character, how they resolve themselves, and also his sister's storyline. While it's a very important character to Ty, and it fuels a lot of events to try to save his sister, and they have a side plot there, I wasn't super invested in that storyline. And I don't know, and here's the thing too. I think a lot of these complaints can also be attributed to the fact that it was an audiobook. I know. I was warned, don't listen to this in audiobook because Kay has such great writing. I was still able to experience that. That being said, audiobooks are so difficult for me because there's like a second where I lose concentration. I probably added an hour of listening on, just rewinding and because I was determined not to miss a single sentence. Because I'm the type of guy who zones out during an audiobook. I'm like, okay, well, can I catch back up with what they're talking about? Normally, yes. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm rewinding. But I think that there were some parts, like the slower parts, the parts where I had to restart more often. I think that was my brain telling me I'm not very interested in these specific parts. I think the whole, the parts with Ty were good. But the parts with the minister were good, and glimpses into his brother were good. The parts with the barbarian rebellion guy were good. His sister, it's just I felt like she was on a side quest. I wish it didn't exist, right? I wish we didn't spend so much time on it. That being said, I do think she was a good character, and how the story ends with the reunion was a very beautiful moment as well. And because at the end of the day, a major theme of this book is about family as well. So I think this book would be very different without her storyline. But I think my brain was just telling me that I wasn't that interested in it. So overall, it wasn't my favorite book. It didn't blow me away, but it's a book that when it ended, I'm like, that was beautiful. So take that what it will, right? There's a reason I don't give star rating, guys, because you know what? I feel a lot of things about a lot of books, and I finished that book feeling content. And Nihad, you are a certified reader. So congratulations on that. So far, we're 4 for 4 on these, February, March, April, May. 4 for 4 on certified readers. So let's keep it up. Let's keep getting those recommendations. They're flowing in, and I appreciate it. And we're gonna be excited for another month. Be sure to like and subscribe if you like the video and you want to see more like in the future. And as always, thank you for sticking around.